I've spent a great deal of time studying, from my fascination, first of all, in neurobiology of the brain, but also with a fascination in the human condition, because it turns out that, in fact, the human condition is entirely dependent on learning, the interaction of your genetic potentials with your environment, your nurture, to produce who you are as a person. I'm going to look at a nerve cell out here in the edge of the brain, and look at its connection into a structure that lies deep inside the brain, approximately here, called the corpus striatum, or the stripy body. The stripy body is the area of our brain that specializes in learning. And when the connection from this nerve cell here reaches a connection with one of these very specialist learning nerve cells in the corpus striatum, if the right set of circumstances applies in terms of the neurobiology and neurochemistry of what's coming together, then learning will occur. And here's a very specialist connection that comes in from the side. Now, down comes the excitation from the thinking brain. It releases a chemical called glutamate. Glutamate travels across this gap, which is called a synapse, and binds onto a specific receptor in the specialist learning cell. Dopamine in a healthy nerve cell is produced at this special synapse. Some of it feeds around the corner, binds on here, and blocks this. Glutamate also feeds back in itself to inhibit further production, so reducing the amount of excitation in the blue cell. The rest of the dopamine travels across here, binds onto a receptor, and counterintuitively, positively influences the glutamate receptor. I say counterintuitively because what we're trying to do is stop the blue cell being excited to death. It is you automatically re-establish the long-term depression and long-term potentiation in this specialist learning cell so that the learning process can continue for that particular data. Now, what does that mean? Well, this changed activation in the blue cell feeds down through the blue cell into the network of nerve cells that that blue cell is connected to. And when it reaches those nerve cells, you can actually watch under a light microscope as they grow out neuroplasm fingers. And when they find another neuroplasm finger that's excited at the same time and growing at the same time, they connect up and form a brand new synapse. We think probably millions and millions and millions of nerve cells become involved to create patterns of learning. And these patterns of learning are called templates. And when you reactivate a template, you will recall or remember what it was that that template has stored for you in data. So a template might, for example, look like this. And when you fire it up, that shape up, it comes up into your conscious mind and you go, ah, that is a cat, or 2 + 2, or an emotion, or a smell, or any memory that you stored. Now, these memories are the core of who you are and how you're made up. Your genetic potentials interact with your environment to hardwire together nerve cells to make the totality of who you are and how you express yourself, that blend between nature and nurture. The key neurochemical in this learning process is dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical in the body which makes and breaks synapses. It seems to be mission critical to that process. Dopamine has been studied a great deal because of the work in Parkinson's disease. And we now understand clearly the things that will generate dopamine production. The first of these is stress. Stress, however, floods the brain with dopamine, so it finds it less able to concentrate or becomes hyper-focused on things that don't matter. It also produces noradrenaline, which drives memory into the unconscious. And it also reduces steroids, and steroids eventually become damaging to the nerve cells that you learn with. However, what we do know from the work in Parkinson's is that reward and the anticipation of reward are potent stimulants of dopamine secretion in a way that optimizes learning. 93% of dopamine secretion in the brain is under the control of the emotional brain. It means that if you want to prepare a brain successfully for learning in a way that optimizes that brain's learning, what you have to do is connect with that individual's emotional self. You have to bring emotional connection into the relationship, obviously professionally, so that the brain of each individual child in front of you is optimized for learning by their dopamine secretion being in the right place. With appropriate emotional connection as well, you get full attention. The attentional system is driven by dopamine. And you also maximize recall because dopamine is part of the recall system as well. Dopamine, the making and breaking of synapses, the hardwiring of learning, all those core neurochemical processes are just what happens in every brain. Whether you've got capabilities that are not in the ordinary pathway, or whether you are, your capabilities are far in excess of the ordinary pathway, you're still going to learn in the same way. To optimize learning in any brain, what we need to do, first of all, is make that core emotional connection in a way that promotes that individual. If an individual feels understood, and I mean properly understood, I don't mean in some superficial way, oh, you come from such and such postcode. I mean genuinely understood as an individual with all your capabilities, whether those be ones that make your path in life easier or ones that make your path in life more difficult, to be understood and accepted as a whole person. That is very good for your self-esteem. If you're understood and your self-esteem is feeling good with this person, then that's good for your self-confidence. Now, if those three things exist, then you are going to be emotionally engaged with the environment that you're in. And if we look at that in terms of learning, if you are understood, that means that someone fully understands how your cognitive mind works. How do you think about things? Do you find some things easy and some things difficult? Are you a fast processor or a slow processor? And so on and so forth. If you understand the person's cognitive capabilities, really get them, then and accept them, then that person is going to feel both self-esteem and confidence when they're with you, because it doesn't matter if they get things wrong, because you're going to go, that's fine, you know, getting things wrong is fine, that's a good thing to learn how to do. Let's work out what happened that got you to an answer that was different from the answer that's accepted as correct. So you now have discourse, you now have a conversive relationship which allows you, without either party taking an ego stance, i.e. being better than the other, where you can just have a chat and work through stuff. Don't forget the power of the peer group in this. That mixed ability classes, we know, and there's a lot of literature on it, actually over time will do much better in terms of their average marks than streaming classes. If you've got mixed ability classes and you allow them to mix and support and help each other, you will find that the whole class moves forward as a body, so your average scores improve. So expeditionary learning functions around these principles. I'm not going to go into them in detail, look them up on Wikipedia, but listen to the words, to the terms used: the primacy of self-discovery, the having of wonderful ideas, the responsibility of learning, empathy and caring, success and failure, collaboration and competition, diversity and inclusion, the natural world, solitude and reflection. Wow, how many of you as adults actually take time to be by yourself and reflect on what you're doing? And finally, service and compassion. And this sentence, we are crew, not passengers. I mean, wow, what? That's just, for me, just wonderful. The principles of behavior and classroom behavior are based around external environment. Obviously, what is the child bringing in from home, which is in some way interfering with their ability to engage successfully with the classroom. Are they coming from a dysfunctional home? Is there a lot of aggression expressed at home? Are they hypervigilant? Are they come from a home who really gives no respect or interest to academic pursuits because we never needed it, why do you need it? Are they coming from a home where there's too much focus on academic achievement, and they're in fact coming in very tired into your classroom because they're being overworked or overstimulated? Second, then, is what are you, the teacher, bringing into the classroom as an adult? You're coming from your environment as well. Not only your present environment, but your entire childhood and adolescent environment, and all the experiences and stuff you've built up from that. Now, that's an area called attachment, which we'll look at as a separate entity. And then the third thing is, so the kids coming in with their environmental experience, you're coming in with your environmental experience. What's happening now between you and that individual is two individuals in terms of an interaction which is supporting or not supporting learning. What's the total environment in the school like in terms of behavior management, and how do people deal with behavior? And the final one, of course, is how well do you understand that individual pupil's capabilities? Is the behavior not so good because actually your expectations of them is unsympathetic and excessive, or because you're not expecting enough of them and you're not challenging enough and they're getting bored? The first thing is there is no simple answer. Simple answers don't exist to behavior because of all those complexities. The concept of expeditionary learning, transforming a school into an expeditionary learning school, takes about 3 years because it has to be instilled within the culture, instilled within the adults, who then instill it within the pupils, who then over a 3-year period, you'll see results after a year to 18 months, but it's 3 years before it usually becomes part of the ordinary experience for pupils and adults within the school. So there just isn't an instant response to, if you're having lots of behavior problem in your class, and if the school is having lots of behavior problems, well, there's an intrinsic problem within the school and how the school is run. And I'm not in any way trying to criticize. Schools get into habits of behavior themselves, which are not necessarily around understanding self-esteem, self-confidence in the pupils. We know from really a broad swathe of literature that Pupils who feel understood, who have good self-esteem and good self-confidence within their environment, and who are emotionally engaged in that environment, very rarely have behavior problems. You will find within any school population a small number of children whose neurobiology is such that, combined with their environment, has produced substantial behavior problems. And doesn't matter what you do, you can't fix it. And that's, well, sometimes you just need expert help or opinion to come in and support you. But also, schools who manage behavior well are actually very tolerant of extreme behaviors in the small number of pupils who express that. So they never use exclusion, or almost never use exclusion. They're constantly dynamically adjusting and creating and finding solutions. And if a pupil does lose it, well, there's timeout, and timeout is with the head teacher, who should be someone who's got good behavioral experience and knows how to handle these kids. And they learn that actually, if you behave badly, you will leave that environment in a way that's professional, controlled, and non-aggressive, and you will be with the head teacher until such times as you've had space to calm down. I think the two things go hand in glove. The point of effective professional relationships is they can be tough when necessary. So proper training in physical restraint, so the child knows if they lose it in the classroom, they will be tough loved, but in a way which is professional, appropriate, and ethical, taken from that environment to somewhere where honestly they can calm down. Most kids who lose it in school don't want to lose it in school, but their neurobiology is such, or their environmental experience is such, or the combination of those two things is such, that they do not have the ordinary effective restraints on behavior that an ordinarily developing child will have. But if you look about it and think about it, this is actually leading into learning, isn't it? That an individual child who has an adult in front of them who really gets them, really understands them, as we said, tough love are required, that's very good for their self-esteem and their self-confidence, and they're emotionally engaged. But this overall process, if it persists and continues over time, produces individuals who have an ability for independence, for initiative, for creativity within their scope, and will feel that they're in an environment that they want to keep returning to. Because if you feel like this, as soon as you step into your place of work, you're going to, I mean, it's like a major thing. It's going to be where you want to be. Optimized dopamine release. Dopamine not only is key in learning, it also drives your attentional system. And as you all know, so when dopamine is released, you will experience reward. And reward's a complex thing, but you'll feel it as reward. So good leadership produces this neurochemical reaction because the person feels understood, their self-esteem is high, their self-confidence is good. This isn't overconfidence, that's a different thing entirely. It's just calm, wise, energized self-confidence. They will be emotionally engaged, dopamine will be released, and they'll feel all these things. Changing the culture of a school, if the leaders of the school don't want it to change, is probably impossible. When I'm fortunate enough to be invited to come to schools to talk about all these sort of things, I know if the head teacher isn't there, it's very unlikely to have any impact on the school. I think that we can all strive to deliver excellence to the individual in front of us. And provided you're delivering on the outcomes that the leadership in the school want, then that excellence can include everything I've been talking about. But it is a challenging and difficult situation. We are in a situation at present where I think nationally, in all environments, management have seized the dragon's portion of control, and their management, so they don't carry any individual responsibility for their actions. And I think there's something very profoundly aberrant in society at present, but I think that's going to take time to address. However, if we all strive to deliver understanding, improve self-esteem, promote self-confidence, and encourage emotional engagement in each individual in front of us, that must in some way be tipping the balance, or starting to tip the balance, hopefully, away from a dogmatic, bullied-based management structure. Having different input on the same topic is really to allow the totality of individuals in front of you to find emotional hooks into what you're doing. To think about anyone as learning in a single way, unless they've got autistic spectrum disorder, which even people with autistic spectrum disorder will have several ways of learning, though they may be more likely to have a preferred route of learning. Our senses are active all the time, and we're absorbing our environment all the time through smell and hearing and touch and vision and our previously learned experience of those experiences, and so on and so forth. So this comment that I keep going on about understanding the individual means you're taking the step deeper than, oh, this person learns best verbally. Because that's just so superficial. I mean, I think it's useful to think about how do you as an individual prefer to learn, and then go, well, if that's how I prefer to learn, if I only teach that way, then 70% of the kids in front of me won't probably have that as their preferred learning way. So I think that's useful in terms of reflection on your own activity and your own way of teaching. So I would strongly support multiple routes, not overdone, so it's not a show, but multiple routes into presenting data, so that for everyone it just becomes a lot more interesting. Because if you keep presenting it the same way, it just becomes tedious. For your own ongoing enjoyment of what you're doing, the subject matter doesn't change. So if you're a secondary school teaching maths, you're going to be teaching the same thing every year to each age group. If you can generate, just by digging into pedagogy, different ways, different angles, okay, let's try this and this with this particular mathematical theorem. Actually, isn't that going to make it more enjoyable for you as well?